You know, you're not going to be so young forever. Have kids. Then you'll be creating something together. That's what keeps the marriage going. This is all just setting. Oh, you do want them.
That's a clip from Mother, the new movie from Darren Aronofsky. He's the writer and director, and he's with us here. Hello, Darren. How are you, sir?
Thank you. It's nice to be back, Simon.
Thank you for coming back. Last time you were in was for Noah.
Yes.
Which is 2014.
If you say so.
Yeah, I believe it's 2014. And there you had, for that, you had some source material.
Yeah.
The Bible has been there for a while. This is so slightly different territory. Take us back to the origins of this story and how long it's taken you to write.
Well, it's a very unique process, this one. It was a completely different way. And I've just been consistently trying to push myself to work in different ways. I think it just makes you kind of rediscover the job a little bit. Normally, films take years. Like Black Swan took 10 years of development from the first time I met with Natalie Portman. Noah was an idea for 20 years. But this one really happened in this kind of 5-day period when I just had this idea. And it was sort of like a fever. I stayed awake for 5 days alone in my house, just banging at the typewriter. And at the end of it, I showed it to a few trusted people, and they were like, "Oh, there's something here. We should work with it." And so, I mean, that was literally 2 years ago that I did that 5-day span. Then I attached Jennifer Lawrence, and suddenly you have a movie when you have Jennifer Lawrence.
Absolutely.
And then a year later we were shooting, and it's been a very, very long post. It's been about a 52-week post, and we premiered in Venice yesterday.
Yeah. And what did they make of it?
It was intense. I always knew it was kind of a hand grenade into pop culture. It was going to be explosive, and I think my films, people generally know that there's a love it or hate it or not get it.
It was reported as, wild applause and some booze.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. That was the first press thing at 8 o'clock in the morning. Please do not see my movie at 8 o'clock in the morning. It is not for it. Every other press screening, the two after that, there was only applause. So, they just love to promote the controversy, but I'm actually okay with it. And, even now there's 5-star reviews in The Guardian, and then there's not such strong reviews in other places. So
you kind of expect that, don't you? I mean, when you make such a strong, visceral film as this, some people aren't going to like it and other people will love it. So.
Yes, and I think it's funny because it's the same people who complain that, every film is exactly the same and they're all boring and they're all formula. The second you do something weird, they go, whoa, hold on. Where's my 3-act structure? And this film was always designed to be something new for audiences and something unexpected.
Yeah, and I just on that 5-day splurge that you had,
fever dream, I like to call it.
Yeah, I mean, but maybe that sort of transmitted itself into the movie because the movie has that kind of a feel. We're trapped in there with you in your fever dream.
Well, I've always been jealous of singer-songwriters who, you hear these stories about Bob Dylan writing a song in the afternoon that becomes, an anthem for a generation. As filmmakers, it's a 2-3 year process to communicate to an audience. And I always wondered what it would be like to try to capture one emotion, one feeling, one moment in time, and just try to crystallize it and then try to turn that into a movie. So I think it has that feeling. It's a very direct line. It's kind of normally I talk about roller coasters describing my films. This is really just truly the first hill of a roller coaster, which is a long, slow climb, and then just a complete plummet into the concrete.
A descent.
Yeah.
Yes. And the story, I realize we haven't really explained what the story is.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned Jennifer Lawrence. Javier Bardem is there in this house. Just explain what you can.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the film is a mystery, and the fun of it is like, going to watch it, not knowing what you're seeing, and then slowly figuring it out, and then the turns and twists it makes because it just constantly doesn't follow the rules. Yet Jennifer Lawrence is at the core of it. She plays kind of the spirit of this home. And the essence of this home, this beautiful home that's in the middle of nowhere. She's married to an older man, played by Javier Bardem, who's a kind of renowned poet. But that's very much on the real humanistic level. There's also like allegorical levels that I hope people will come in, and it's great because the reviewers that love it are the ones who are picking up on the allegory, and then you get people who just completely miss that there's anything else going on, which was interesting because I think surrealism as a technique is something very lost. Like, films have become very literal, and yet they are the great pathways into dream state because it's very similar to, a waking dream watching a movie.
Give us a helping hand then, if the people who don't get it are the ones that are annoying, and what should we be thinking when we go into this?
It really was about capturing where we are right now in 2017. It was a snapshot of the world. I think anyone who sort of reads through a newspaper and sees all the good and all the bad, I wanted to try to sort of take this home we're all on together, this planet that everyone knows we're all on the same planet, and everyone sort of gets most people sort of get the idea that coal plants on one side of the planet affect the other side of the planet, and a war over here affects that. And suddenly we're for the first time in our history realizing that the bounty of Mother Earth isn't infinite, that we're on this finite home. So I decided to take that allegory, to turn that into an allegory and turn that home into a home that all of us can understand. Everyone knows what happens if you go over someone's house and you burn a hole in the carpet with a cigarette, or pour some wine on a beautiful linen. So there's that type of connection going on. And I don't want to get more specific than that, but that's enough of a hint.
Kind of collapse of society, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, a big influence for any of the film fans is Louis Buñuel's Exterminating Angel, which basically took was a critique of upper class society. They all get stuck in a room for some surreal reason, and then we see kind of a Lord of the Flies sort of unfold.
Sure. And you mentioned Mother Earth in your answer there, so can we take that Mother Earth and put that with Jennifer Lawrence in the title of your film?
If you please.
If I choose
to. It's total. I mean, it works on a few levels, and I think the actors were all aware of the different levels, and I wanted them to be able to play. And to be fair, a lot of people come in and they just do see a relationship film between, an older successful writer and a younger a caretaker, and they understand the relationship that way, and that's great. They feel it that way. I can't believe that's all they see, but they have a fine experience that way too.
Jennifer Lawrence, I've never seen her ever put in a performance which is anything other than mesmerizing.
Yeah.
And we follow her pretty much entirely through this film. We're like over her shoulder, or we are in her face.
Yeah.
And we kind of see the house through her eyes. Some of the shots are long. You just explain a little bit about what you were trying to do with that.
Well, I've always been very interested in subjective filmmaking, which is basically filmmaking from a specific point of view. I mean, I started doing that in Pi, my first film, just because I had no money and I had one actor, so I had to make it about that guy. But it's become a form that is very interesting for me. So you're right. The film, there's only 3 types of shots in the film, which is over her shoulder or on her face, and sometimes the camera dances around from those 2 angles just to see what she's seeing and then see her reaction, and then sometimes we cut to her point of view of what she's actually looking at. But that's the only coverage, and the film is a purely subjective experience from Mother's point of view, and from Jen's. I mean, it's a 2-hour-long film, and this sounds like a turnoff to some people maybe, but 66 minutes of it is on Jennifer Lawrence's face. And yet she never ceases to amaze me every time I watch, and I've watched it hundreds of times. I'm always seeing little things that she's doing that are I'm just like, wow, I've never seen that before. And so she keeps it alive and she keeps it exciting.
And on the physical exertion which she went through, I think she said in an interview that she hyperventilated so much in one of the scenes, she dislocated a rib. Is that right?
Yeah, and I just heard her say that she actually tore her diaphragm as well from it, which I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't know. I mean,
that was news to you?
That I knew she was hurt. I didn't know. I'm amazed I didn't know the diagnosis. I think she might have kept it from me, which is interesting.
She didn't say, "Oi, Darren,
yeah,
look what I've done here."
No. I knew she was hyperventilating, and I was sitting with her while she was on oxygen, and it was intense, and it was all from emotional. It wasn't anything physical. It was an emotional, the psychology of it. And it was funny last night in Venice while we were watching it. she kind of got caught up in it again and started to kind of lose it. And I was like, the lights are going to come on in a second, so be ready. But she really got caught up in it.
Some listeners' questions before we finish. Matt Owen says, you famously once said, Darren, the film isn't done until you cut your favorite shot. Can you give us some examples of the shots that you've cut and explain why? I mean, maybe with reference to Mother. Is that true in this film?
That is a quote of mine. And I'm trying to think if there was anything I lost that, it was a strange edit, and it was a strange design because the film is so linear. Normally when you're cutting a film, you're like, oh, I can pull this scene out and put it 3 scenes earlier, and it actually has an interesting effect that I didn't realize. Kind of like when you're on a word processor moving around ideas in an essay, you can do that and have different effects. This film was so linear in everything from performance to makeup to hair that nothing was shifted. And in fact, if you lose something, it's funny because last night at Venice, no one left their seats, which was amazing. I've never seen that. But we did a screening earlier in New York, and a few people went to the bathroom. It wasn't as much of a cinephile crowd. And what I realized is while watching them leave, I'm like, oh, if they don't see this, they're not going to. And every sort of moment in the film is actually either planting a red herring or planting a seed that you need to know for the future. And if you don't see it, it's just not going to make as much sense.
So even though the quote is accurate, it didn't apply to this film?
Yeah, I'm going to have to, we'll talk about it next time I see you some of the next film, because it's actually, I want to call can I get a lifeline? Like, I call my editor?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of question you have to think about. Maybe try this one. Tom Williams says, in Black Swan, Vincent Cassell's ballet director says his aim is to, quote, strip it down and make it visceral.
Yeah.
Would you say this reflects your approach to your subjects?
Ooh, that's it. I mean, definitely, I guess, I'm very interested in truthful and honest emotions. I'm always interested in pushing actors to give me everything they got, just because I think that's why we come to see movies. I always talk about one of the great inventions of the 20th century that doesn't get credit is the close-up, which is the ability to sit there and stare into Paul Newman's eyes without being self-conscious, because he's not going to ever look back at you. You can sit there and look into this beautiful man's mind and eyes and discover it. And that's what cinema did. It brought the close-up. And so I love filling those close-ups with emotion.
Darren, we appreciate you speaking to us. I think the moral of the film is if Ed Harris comes knocking, just don't answer the door.
You'll never answer the door again.
Darren Aronofsky, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Simon.